bum, ba-da-da-da-da. MLB kicks off Thursday, 1 p.m. in the Bronx when the Yankees take on the Red Sox. You know what it is. You know about that rivalry. You've heard all about it. To help us to just talk about baseball, to get smarter about baseball, to learn about baseball is Mike Petriello, senior writer, analyst at MLB.com, co-host of the MLB Ballpark Dimensions podcast. Ballpark Dimensions, a bugaboo of mine. Mike, welcome to Takeline.
Is a bugaboo a good thing? I hope so. Thank you.
It is. How can the ballparks be different sizes? What are we doing? Shouldn't they be the same? You can't go into like an NBA arena and have like one basket is 11 feet and the other one is 9 feet. Like, it's just got to be the same.
No, it's beautiful. Listen, the Orioles changed their ballpark this year to be more neutral, and it makes me mad. I want them to be weird. Weird is good.
A simple question to begin with. We're about to embark on this new season. How thankful are you that we aren't experiencing a second shortened season in 3 years?
Oh, extremely thankful. I mean, primarily as a baseball fan for my whole life, raising a baseball fan, and as someone who derives 100% of my income from baseball. I could not be happier. I've told this story before. Ryan's maybe heard me say this already, but like 3 days after the lockout ended, and free agency starting and trade starting and everything's getting emotion and my phone's ringing again. My wife turns to me and she says, "Hey, you don't seem as miserable today as you've been for the last 2 months." And I'm like, yes, 100% true.
Mike, so the way I see your job, you're kind of, one of the guys who is tasked with bridging the information gap between, the data and information that clubs and the league receive through StatCast and the way fans understand and interpret that information in terms of viewing their favorite players or their favorite team. I'm curious, if you were just a baseball fan, not who you are, if you were like a casual baseball fan watching the game right now, would you have any idea what's going on or how decisions are made?
I would if I was watching one of the better broadcasts that would explain that to you. And
which ones would those be?
Oh, well, I'm not going to name names. Listen, there are 30 broadcast teams, right? More than that if you include radio, but just on TV. And then there's a handful of national broadcasts, and some of them do a really, really fantastic job. Like, I'll name names, and I'm biased because I'm friends with most of these people, right? Like Jason Benetti and Len Casper in Chicago, and Boog Shambi also in Chicago. A couple other people like that. They do a really fantastic job. There's some others that maybe either ignore it or actively trash on it, which I think is a shame, because you don't have to love the math, you don't have to love the numbers, but if you want to understand why teams are doing things, I do think that's important. It's incumbent on the broadcast to explain those things. You don't need to know all of the really complicated math that goes into this, but if you're being told that a guy is a bad hitter because he hits 230, well, we know that's not true. We know that's not how the teams are choosing to play or pay these guys. And I feel like if I'm just picking up a game for the first time, somebody should be explaining these things to me in a way that's accessible, hopefully.
On that topic, I think, one of the points of contention with the way NBA games are broadcast nationally amongst NBA fans, a point of annoyance, I think, is you watch the Thursday TNT game or the Tuesday TNT game, and, Shaq and Charles Barkley, a big part of the TNT broadcast, actively hate the way the game is played today. They don't like it. Their position has essentially been legislated out of the game, although it's been a great year for centers. Similarly, as you were saying, baseball has been at the forefront of analytics in sports, right? Really at the cutting edge. How would you bring that into the broadcast? And you said in an engaging way. What would you who does it well, and what is the secret sauce to doing that, to just getting fans smarter as they watch a game?
Well, I think first and foremost is finding the beauty in the way baseball has changed. I don't think you have to be Pollyanna about it and pretend that everything is perfect and it's the best day in baseball history every single day, because that's not true. I want to see fewer strikeouts. I want to see more action. I want to see the game move along. I have a thousand different ideas of things I would do to improve the game, because I think the game has a bright future if some of the changes we make, that we want to make are put into place. But I don't think you can go out there and say, well, back in my day, everything was better. No, it wasn't. No, the athletes today we have in baseball are both just the best that we've ever had, the most talented. The young generation, I feel, is just incredibly interesting. Guys like Soto and Tatis and Pete Alonso and on and on and on. Like, they're just really interesting. They're getting better at using social media. So I think we can kind of acknowledge that there are things that we might want to do better, but also acknowledge that, man, like, the guys are incredible and everybody is making these decisions. Like, why am I putting the shift in place? Because it's weird. Well, I think it'll help me turn baseballs into outs, which I think will help me win games. You know what I mean? And so if you can explain why these things are happening, and you can do it in a way that shows that you are both engaged and involved and interested, like Boog Shabby is a great example. Again, he's a friend of mine, so there's a bias, right? He calls me like 3 times a week asking for help understanding something or explaining something. As you guys know, I was at a hockey game today and he was texting me like, "Hey, how do I look up this number?" Because he loves it. But you ever watch a broadcast of his? It's not an algebra class. He's not like speaking over your head. He's mixing the stories he tells from like going into the clubhouse and speaking to the players and letting you know a little bit about their lives with what's going on in the field, with what's going on in the clubhouse, and doing it all with a joy. And I think that is like the perfect way that we should be describing baseball to people.
Do you feel that there is a tension between baseball as an entertainment product and baseball as a product where, at the end of the day, the job is to preserve outs and win games?
Yes, absolutely. If I'm running a team, if I'm the general manager or the manager, my job is to win games. And if that means
Right.
I'm going to play the most boring style of baseball that I could possibly come up with, and that wins me games, that's I'm going to keep my job. And I think there is a different level of the sport whose job it is not to win games, but to innovate and evolve the sport. And that's the commissioner's office. That is, to some extent, the players union. That's not the people running the teams making the trades, but the levels above that, saying, okay, how can we grow the sport? How can we make it more interesting? And if there are things we don't like that have evolved on the field, like, I know lots of people hate the opener, right? Lots of people hate that starting pitchers don't go deeper. Not everybody, some people do, whatever. But if you think that those are things that are bad for the sport, change the rules. There's really smart people in front offices. They'll figure out something else. And if that's annoying, change that rule too. You know what I mean? There are ways around this, but not for the people on the field. They just need to win.
You mentioned you had a lot of ideas. Lindsey and I were talking about this just before you got on. Would love to hear some of those ideas, Mike.
Well, let me preface this by saying, even though I do write for the league's website,
Of course.
I am in my basement here, and I
Of
have
course.
very little pull towards actually any of these things happening. I have for years wanted the pitch clock to come into being, and it
Yeah.
sounds like we're getting really close to that. I know it's actually been on the books like forever, but maybe we'll actually enforce it now. That and limiting the number of pitchers either in a game or on a roster. I think those are the big 2 things, and both of those are moving. I think that's really, really going to help a lot. And I think if we can just dial back pitchers throwing at 120% on every single pitch, that'll A, move the game along, and B, hopefully put more balls in play. Because the one issue I have is that when you say, well, I think the game needs to be sped up a little bit, then the feedback you get is, well, you want less baseball, you must hate baseball. It's like, come on, I love baseball.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't need a Tuesday night game between the Royals and the Tigers to be 4.5 hours long here. So can we speed it up? Can we kill some of the dead time? So those are the big 2, the pitch clock, limiting pitchers. I really think those will help a lot.
How do we deal with the velocity issue? Higher mound, shorter distance? What do we do there?
Yeah, no, great question. I think lowering the mound would be interesting. Now, a lot of this kind of comes with the unknown of, will it increase pitcher injuries, right? Which is always kind of a concern. But if you go back to when the guys were throwing 300 innings, they weren't throwing every single pitch as hard as they possibly could. They were pacing themselves a little bit, holding something in reserve for later in the game. Nobody does that now. You're expected to come in. Every pitch is the most important pitch you're going to throw. I don't think we can dial back the physical improvements, the training, the fact that guys actually train with weighted balls to learn to throw hard. For a long time, it was assumed you couldn't learn velocity. And turns out that's garbage. You absolutely can learn velocity. We're not going to dial that back. But that kind of goes back to what I was saying about the pitch clock a little bit. There is some evidence that if you take more time between pitches and you compose yourself and take a deep breath, you can get some velocity there. If we force guys to go pitch, 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 maybe they have to pace themselves a little bit longer, limiting the number of pitchers you can use. Now, if you say, well, I'm not going to get lifted after 2 innings, I kind of need to give my team 5 innings, maybe I'm going to pace myself to be able to do that. It's not going to undo the physical gains that these guys are all incredible athletes who are trying to throw hard. But I think there are rule changes that can hopefully help with that a little bit.
Mike, this makes me think. I was talking to a pitcher the other day who was saying that it's like really weird to pitch against the Kansas City Royals right now because they are still running a retro offense. And when they were very good, it was super dynamic and they made it work. But as they've had some issues, it's like you go out there, you're probably going to give up 8 hits, but it's going to be a total of 2 runs. I'm not sure that I had thought about this previously, but I'm curious, so for pitchers where they need to throw max effort and max velocity on every pitch, they're pitching to hitters who are trying to make the most out of every hit. We're no longer in an era where guys are settling for singles and we're manufacturing runs. Like, these guys are trying to do damage. And so if you throw either the wrong pitch or, a 75% pitch, like, there's a real chance that thing gets parked on the moon at this point. Like, where do you see the balance between where pitchers are and where hitters are at this point in the game?
Yeah, that's a good point, because you go back to when all the shortstops looked like Luis Aparicio or Ozzie Smith, and they're like, I don't know how big Ozzie Smith was, but they're like 5'8" and 160 pounds, Phil Rizzuto, right? Yeah. And now shortstops are Fernando Tatis and Corey Seager, and everybody in that lineup can crush the ball. So I think you're right to some extent. We're not going to go back to that, but I do think that, well, there's 2 answers. One is an answer everybody will hate, which is that if you were to take the baseball and really deaden it and make it harder to hit home runs and make it so only that Aaron Judge and Sal Perez and the big boys like that can hit home runs, maybe the guys who are on the lower end of that scale will not think that's the most optimal way for them to proceed. Does anybody in the sport want to talk about changing the properties of the baseball? I don't think that's
never been done. That's never been done. That's never happened, has it?
It's never happened.
I can't do that news cycle again. Honestly, no. You're gonna need to come up with it. I've been there, done that. You're gonna need to find a different solution because I'm not dealing with that crap anymore.
No, absolutely. I mean, so that's part of it. And then you can see that they're trying to make some other rule changes around the edges to, maybe incite stolen bases again, right? Like changing the size of the bases. Like, I don't know how much impact that's actually going to have, but I like that they're trying it. I like that they're testing it out. Like, that's clearly what's on everybody's mind, which is how can we dial back the strikeouts? Because what I've learned is strikeouts are cool to watch on TV when you can like GIF them and slow them down. Right. But and you're in the center field camera in HD, right? And they're tough to watch when you're sitting, on the upper deck on the first base side. And it's like, okay, I just want to see an outfielder do something sweet. So again, we're never going back to 1955 baseball. That is never, ever, ever happening. We know so much more about it. The players are better. The talent base is larger, far more international, obviously. But I don't think we should try to pretend we should go back to that. I mean, this is a sport that was created by, again, guys who are my height, right? I'm like 5'10" and 150 pounds. Like, I would have been an all-star in 1880. The guys now are huge. And every other sport has made changes to try to, change with the times. As we talked about, I'm a hockey fan, right? Hockey for me got unwatchable around 2005 or so, right? It was all clutch and grab, and the guys were so much larger on the ice than guys in the 1920s had been, and it just wasn't fun anymore. Well, they made rule changes, right? They made offense a little easier. Like, we all know in football, the defense basically is not allowed to play defense anymore, right? Is that good or bad? I don't know. But we should not treat this game as though it should be like frozen in amber from when Babe Ruth first stepped on the field. It's a different sport. There are different people. All of it's different. Let's try to evolve with that.
All right. So what do you think Babe Ruth's slash line would be in 2021?
I'm the one who got Adam Ottavino to say that.
Oh, I'm aware. And we both know it's true. We both know it's true. He gets 22 inches of horizontal break on a slider. Babe Ruth was playing against mechanics. Like, let's be real. But anyway, Answer the question.
Oh, well, I mean, it's always like a philosophical thing, right? Is it Babe Ruth in the DeLorean transported now, or did Babe Ruth grow up in the 90s and, with modern training?
No, we went back.
Stuff?
Yeah, we went back to
DeLorean.
we went back to 1919 and we put him in the DeLorean and we brought him here. We let him get acclimated like to the internet and electricity and phones and stuff. And we let that process play out for like a month, 2 months. So he's not completely shell shocked when he walks into an actual MLB park. And now we're able to bring him in and start training him up.
He wouldn't make the roster. And here's the thing. Part of it is in his day, what was spring training for, right? It was working off the beer weight from the winter.
Right. Yeah. It was for transitioning to bourbon off of beer.
These guys are in shape 365 days a year. And I know you said you let them get acclimated, and I respect that. But not only did he not get on a cross-country flight, not only did he never face a pitcher who wasn't white, he never faced a 95-mile-an-hour slider, right? He faced pitchers who were probably throwing 85 to start with and then threw 185 pitches every third day.
Takeline is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the best and easiest way to play fantasy sports. You know it by now, but maybe you need another reminder. If you sign up now with code TAKELINE, you'll double your first deposit up to $100 in free money when you make your first deposit of $10 or more. Deposit $10, you get $20. Deposit $20, you get $40. Deposit $100, you get another $100 free. That's how that works. With their slick mobile app, as slick as a dolphin's skin, and user-friendly website, you'll have no problem jumping right in and drafting your squad. So what are you waiting for? Sign up with code TAKELINE. Get your deposit match and play today.
So no, he would get killed in modern baseball.
We get him a nutritionist. We get him a trainer. We get him on the treadmill. We get him doing squats. We get him doing bench presses.
No shot.
I mean, no. Mike, with the Ottavino Babe Ruth thing, and then I said something a while ago about like how it's funny that like Cy Young, if transported in today's modern game, would just get shelled. But
yeah.
The most prestigious award for pitchers is named after him. I don't personally think that's disrespectful to say,
right.
That Babe Ruth hasn't faced, a wiffle ball slider, or that Cy Young hasn't faced Aaron Judge or whatever. But why do you think there is so much emotion around the idea that like comparing era to era is somehow disrespectful to guys who were very, very good for the eras that they played in?
I'd be interested to know if that happens in other sports, right? I'm not much of a basketball fan, but I know George Mikan, right? He would probably get ruined by.
He would not. Yeah, he would not. He would be playing like in the Dominican Republic or something right now. He would not even be playing in one of the
Slovenia,
top 10.
Right.
Like professional. I don't think he'd even make the Slovenian league. He was 6'10", so he had decent size. But I mean, it's a good point because when you think about the formative years of the NBA. Lakers, Celtics, and the great Celtics teams that won, 8 out of 10 championships in the 50s and 60s. Those, with some very, very rare exceptions, Bill Russell, I think, would have had the athleticism and the instincts to I think play in today's league. But like Bob Cousy of the Celtics couldn't dribble with his left hand. Like he would get absolutely mauled. It would be disgusting if he got out on an NBA court. But strangely, basketball fans, by and large, don't have the memory that MLB fans have. No one is out here saying like, "Well, this would be disrespectful to Cousy and the guys." Nobody cares. It's weirdly like very few people think of anything that happened pre-1980. Like I think specific to basketball, to NBA basketball, like the consciousness of the sport was forged in Magic versus Bird in the 80s, and anything that happened before that kind of didn't happen. It didn't really, which is sad for me as a Knicks fan. That's when our championships happened, so nobody cares about them. But it's not the same with MLB, where it's like we've got to draw a through line from these guys that played in 1920 to today.
Yeah, what people aren't out there respecting the one title the Milwaukee Hawks won or something like that. I will say there's an exception, right? Babe Ruth, I don't think would be that good today. I think Ted Williams would actually be good today.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
He was built
Yep.
for today's game. I
Yep.
mean, who would have loved like launch angle and exit velocity? Ted Williams was basically a scientist. So I don't want to say like literally nobody before 1975 could survive today. I don't think that's true. But to your larger point, I do think that the history of baseball is at the same time a huge strength and an enormous weight, right? Because as you said, no other sport treasures the history of the game as much as baseball fans do. I mean, we're coming up on like 100 years almost since the 1927 Yankees, and there's a lot of baseball fans who could name like 3/4 of that lineup off the top of their head. It's really cool that there's so much baseball to go back on. At the same time, you could really be weighed down by that. You have a lot of people who are saying, I don't want any changes. Baseball has never changed. I hear that all the time when there's a rule change. Baseball has never changed. And I'm like, hold up. First of all, everything before 1947 barely counts in my book. But if you look at all of the other things, the DH, the wild card, the closer, like all of it, baseball has changed constantly. You want to go back real far. Well, the batter used to be able to tell the pitcher where he wanted the ball to be thrown, and it was thrown underhand. So yeah, baseball has changed a lot, and I don't think we need to be afraid of saying, well, it will continue to change.
I mean, it's funny when you look at like not just like starter workloads from like the 60s and 70s and whatnot, but even like, just the sheer number of pitchers that were used for a team across a full season. And it's like 8. Whereas the New York Yankees are considering opening the season with 16 pitchers on their roster. Like, yes, actually the game has changed. It's interesting thinking about like Babe Ruth in today's game versus, how he operated then. I mean, what's kind of remarkable about him is, that he had the talent to be such a schlub. Whereas I watched one of those, GQ, 10 essential things videos with Shohei Ohtani, and so enlightening. This dude is taking his own like portable icing machine on the road. He's taking his own compression sleeve on the road. He has a pillow that was like specifically designed for his head and shoulders and all these things. And like, so Ohtani's essential things are basically, physical maintenance tools, which, it's just, it makes me think about, the way he performs and the things that players have access to. But like, I also don't think that most players are taking portable ice machines on the road and compression sleeves. And, I said this to someone the other day and he was like, well, but I also don't have to do both jobs. Like he just literally has less time in his day. But, the idea that like the energy and effort and tools that Shohei Ohtani has to be Shohei Ohtani, for as remarkable as that is pretty fascinating to me, I think. And I'm curious, Mike, like, did you think that this was going to be possible for someone to do what Ohtani has done?
If anybody tells you they thought that they would see this, then they are lying to you because it is almost impossible. I've seen him do it, and I still barely even believe that he's doing it. And unless he gets hurt, I can't imagine he won't do it again. And I know that we like to think, okay, this is like the first of many. There's going to be more two-way players, and I'm sure guys will try, but it's so hard to do even one of the things he's doing, right?
Yeah.
To do them both at the same time, it's just words don't really describe it. And then you think about the phenomenon he's become. Like, obviously, everything he does on the field is incredible, right? But everybody who has talked to him or spoken to him is like, hey, this guy is not only like an incredible baseball player, he's interesting, he's handsome, he's funny, he's like everything you want a baseball ambassador to be. Obviously, he appeals to a global audience, not just an English speaking audience. And to have all of that in one package, I kind of feel like that part of it doesn't get talked about enough. Like, I don't remember exactly when, but at some point in his youth, he wrote like a list of to-dos for his life, basically describing what has happened. And it's hard to think of anybody who could love baseball more than a guy who would do that and then accomplish it, on the biggest stage. And what he's done is so impressive that I'm this close to no longer being annoyed that the Angels can't get Mike Trout into the playoffs and being more annoyed they can't get Shohei Ohtani into the playoffs.
I'm glad that you said it, because I wasn't going to go there. As listen, I'm a New Yorker that lives in LA, And so I don't like to say things like, wouldn't it be better for the sport if Shohei Ohtani was on a marquee team? But wouldn't it be better for the sport if Shohei Ohtani was like on a marquee team? Wouldn't that be great?
It should be a marquee team, right? Like, yeah. I know Anaheim's not LA, I understand, but like, it's still Southern California. It's still with Mike Trout. I sort of wonder how many teams you need to expand the playoffs by to ensure they'll get in. Because I'm not sure this year has done it, to be honest. I don't think I would pick them right now. And that just makes me so sad because we're running out of time. And it's not just the playoffs. I realized this the other day. We talk about how Trout hasn't been to the playoffs since 2014 and how that stinks. They haven't been over 500 since 2015. Like, what are you doing?
I mean, that is truly nuts, truly insane. A perfect transition to my final question. You know, we're heading into opening day. What are some things to look out for from your perspective as we head into this new season?
Well, I think the first thing I want to see over the first couple of weeks is just how everyone has reacted to the weird offseason, right? Like, we know that the rosters are a little larger, which is how you can have abominations like a 16-man pitching staff. You know, so I want to know how deep guys are going to go. I want to know how long it's going to take them to get built up. You know what I'm really interested in, and I'm actually going to defer to Lindsey on this because you're talking to guys in person a lot more than I am. For how many years have we heard players say spring training's too long, right? But it's usually the hitters saying that. They're like, we don't need all this time. Give me 3 or 4 weeks and we'll be fine. And the pitchers need more time. And I'll be really fascinated to know if now that has happened, if the hitters actually believe that and they're like, hey, this is great. Let's do this every year. And the pitchers get all upset because they're not built up. I'm just speculating. I don't know if that's what'll happen, but I would really enjoy hearing guys talk about that. You know, so just like on an overall basis, that's the number one thing I'm looking at. Number two, even though I live in New York, I'm not a Mets fan. I actually grew up a Dodgers fan, but I still want to know what's going to happen with the Mets because DeGrom is hurt. Scherzer's kind of hurt. And that team's really old. Like, they were risky even when those guys are healthy. And if it doesn't go well, and I feel like it might not, what does that look like with that payroll and that manager and that roster if they got off to a lousy start? Because Chris Bassett, no disrespect, I like him very much, is your ace. What does that look like?
It looks like another lost Mets season, which is a thing that I think Mets fans are acclimated to over the last 18 to 20-ish years. He is Mike Petriello, MLB.com senior writer and co-host of Ballpark Dimensions. Mike, this was really fantastic. Thank you for joining us.
This was super fun, guys. Thanks for having me.